So you got Gareth A. Davis coming out claiming that the Chris Eubank Jr. Conor Benn fight has been signed. Now, if it was Mike Coppinger saying this, I would tend to suspect that it's probably accurate. But with Gareth A. Davis, his sources, quote unquote, don't seem to be quite so reliable. So I'm going to take this with a pinch of salt. I'm not saying it's not going to happen, but I need to see an official announcement, a formal announcement. Anyway, if the fight does take place, for me, this makes no sense for Chris Eubank Jr. because he's damned either way, whether he wins or loses. If he wins, they're going to say, you beat a blown up welterweight, not only a welterweight, but a guy who's a small welterweight. I mean, you look at Conor Benn in the ring, he's smaller than just about all of his opponents. Most people believe he could make 140. This is a small welterweight. And not only that, he's not a world champion. This isn't like when Kell Brook went up and fought Triple G, for example. Kell Brook was a big welterweight for one, and he was a reigning world champion at 147. Conor Benn is neither. So Eubank Jr. would get absolutely no credit, and I'm not saying he should get credit, but he would get no credit for beating a Conor Benn. And unless he beats Conor Benn decisively, like let's say, unless he knocks him out in 5 rounds or wins every round and stops him in 6 or 7, unless it's complete dominance from Chris Eubank Jr., then people are going to treat this pretty much as a loss. Let's say he goes 12 rounds and it's competitive. They're going to treat it like it's a loss. And if he actually loses, then wow, Chris Eubank Jr.'s career is potentially over, or at least his career as a relatively high-earning fighter. Because how are people going to take him seriously again if he loses to this little welterweight in Conor Benn, who's not even a world champion? So from a legacy perspective, and I'm talking, and I know that there's some mileage in the nostalgic rivalry between Benn and Eubank. Okay, these two being the sons of the fighters who started the rivalry. I get that. But I'm talking about beyond just one particular family rivalry, if you want to call it that. The boxing legacy of Chris Eubank Jr. is not going to be enhanced by having Conor Benn on his resume, is it? Right? A little welterweight who's not a world champion. That's not going to enhance his legacy. And it's not going to enhance his current status in the middleweight division. The only thing this does for Chris Eubank, it does nothing for his reputation at all. Even if he wins by first round knockout, it does nothing for him. The only thing it does is make him presumably a load of money. And perhaps that's enough for him. Maybe he thinks it's so easy that he's willing to take a knock to his reputation. If he wins, well, he was supposed to win, but what are you doing picking on welterweights anyway? Maybe he's willing to take that just to get a bag. So, yeah, that's how I feel about the fight with regards to Eubank Jr.'s potential participation in it. For Conor Benn, there's a lot more upside here because, of course, he's going to make a load of money. And at the same time, if he wins, well, if he loses, he can just say, hey, I tried a thing. This was me fighting a middleweight and I'm a small welterweight, so you can't be too harsh on me for losing to this guy. I mean, he was supposed to beat me, right? And most people would concur with that. But if he wins, wow, it would be a surprise and his stock would go up, even in the welterweight division, because people are going to say, hey, if he's able to beat someone as big as Chris Eubank Jr., who's fought as high as 168, then maybe it won't be a problem for him going in there against a big welterweight like an Errol Spence or even a Jerome Boots Ennis. You see what I'm saying? So this is almost like, I don't want to say it's a win-win for Conor Benn, but there's certainly a lot more upside. Yeah, if he loses, it's not going to be good, but it won't be as devastating to his reputation as it would be if Eubank lost to him. So that's my take on it. According to, again, Gareth A. Davies, the fight is, I think he said planned for October. That's the date that's being floated around at the moment. It could possibly happen earlier. I would actually, even though I quite like all this nostalgia I would actually prefer to see Conor Benn fight Keith Thurman. Because this Eubank Jr. fight, and I forgot to mention, the Eubank Jr. fight would also be at a catch weight, according to Gareth Davies, of something like 155 or 56 pounds. And of course, you have to factor that in terms of what Eubank Jr. is going to be like in the ring. Will he be drained? He's never fought below 160, to my knowledge, unless it was very early on in his career. Certainly, he hasn't fought below 160 at any decent level. So, yeah, that's my take on the situation, if it indeed ends up happening. But I would prefer to see Conor Benn face a Keith Thurman, because Thurman is a welterweight, Conor Benn's a welterweight, and it will be a good gauge. It would be a good gauge to see how far off Conor Benn is from fighting the top guys in the division. And it would also be a name if he was able to beat a Keith Thurman. I mean, imagine if he was able to stop Keith Thurman. I'm not saying he would, but imagine if he was able to achieve that. So lots of upside in beating a Keith Thurman, and it's just a more sensible fight than a Chris Eubank Jr. fight in terms of what he's trying to do at welterweight, I would say. I mean, but again, there's a lot of upside for Conor Benn if he does beat Chris Eubank Jr. Not that, Eubank Jr. is a top welterweight, he's a middleweight. But if he beats Eubank Jr., yeah, people are going to look at it and say, hey, he can handle much bigger guys. I don't think they're going to be as convinced by Conor Benn as they would be if he beat Thurman and did it convincingly. But it would still, I think, bolster his reputation somewhat if he beat Eubank Jr. Anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you're tired of the biased narratives and mass censorship on mainstream platforms, and you want to be part of a community of critical thinkers who love free speech just as much as you do, then come and join me on Patreon and access my weekly no-holds-barred, censorship-free podcast where we lift the lid on a wide variety of controversial topics. It's not mainstream friendly, it's not politically correct, but that's the whole point. We dare to stand as a beacon of reason against an army of insanity. Just head on over to my Patreon page and select the tier called Hatman Hot Topics. You'll gain access to a minimum of 2 hours of exclusive content every single week, including podcasts, videos, interviews, live stream Q&As, as well as my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. Not to mention a vast back catalog of hundreds of hours of previous episodes. You can listen via the Patreon app with the option to download in high-quality MP3. We've also got an Element group where you can come and chat and hang out with myself and other members. Unlike Discord, it has full end-to-end encryption, is decentralized, and it's 100% censorship-free. You can also send voice notes as well as much larger audio and video files than you can on Discord. So come and sign up on Patreon. There's no contract, there's no commitment, you can cancel at any time, and it's cheaper than a cup of coffee. So I'll see you over there. I'm out.